Hi, I'm Kristen Amdahl. This is part 3 of my series on how to make knit motif ornaments. I'm making them for my Christmas tree, and I'm using the reference section of my book, Knitting Outside the Swatch. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make, let's find it, the 6-petal pinwheel motif. I'm going to use some worsted weight yarn, a size 8 5mm set of knitting needles, a yarn needle, some scissors, and I do think that a little bit of spray starch is helpful in stiffening up this particular motif to make it into an ornament. So let's get started. The pinwheel flower begins with a slip knot. So we're going to wrap the yarn around our fingers, pull a loop through the circle, and then slowly pull it tight. I'm going to slide that onto our knitting needle, then holding the tail yarn in front and the working yarn in back, we're going to cast on 3 stitches. The slip knot counts as 1. Wrap the yarn around your thumb, pull the working yarn through the tail yarn on your thumb. There's our cast on 2, and we'll do it a third time for cast on 3 stitches. Row 1 begins with knit into the front and back of the first stitch. That means we insert our needle into the front of the stitch, yarn over, pull a loop through. Then before we remove the stitch from the left hand needle, we're going to insert our needle into the back side of the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. We now have 2 stitches on our right hand needle, and now we slide the stitch off our left hand needle. We've made 2 stitches from 1, or an increase. Then the rest of the row is to knit 2, so we'll knit 1 and knit 2. So now we've increased to a 4 stitch count. 1, 2, 3, 4. Turn our work. Row 2 and all even numbered rows is knit across. So we'll knit 2, 3, and 4. Turn our work. Next row is knit into the front and the back of the first stitch, and then knit 3. So now we've increased to 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Turn our work. All even rows are knit across, so we'll knit 2, 3, 4, and 5. Turn our work. Row 5 is to knit into the front and the back of the first stitch, knit into the front and the back of the same stitch to create 2 stitches from 1, then knit 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Our stitch count has now increased to 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Turn our row and knit across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Next row is to knit into the front and the back of the first stitch, knit into the front and the back of the same stitch. We've now created 2 stitches from 1, or an increase, and knit into each of the next 5 stitches. We've now increased to 7 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Turn our work. Knit across all 7 stitches. Okay, then row 9 is to bind off the first 4 stitches. So we have to knit 2 to bind off our first one. We're going to pick up that first stitch, pull it up over the second and off the needles, bind off 1, then we bind off 2, 3, and 4. Now remember, we had to knit 2 in order to bind off the first one, so that means that now that we're done binding off, the stitch on our right hand needle counts as our first stitch for the rest of the row where it says to knit 3. So there's your knit 1, knit 2, and knit 3. Then row 10 will be same as every even row, which is to just plainly knit across. Okay, we've now done our first petal for the flower, or our first repeat. So the repeat is to repeat rows 1 through 10. So now we'll start over again with knit into the front and back of the first stitch, and then knit 2. Okay, then the even numbered rows is to knit across. We now have 4 stitches. Turn our work, knit into the front and back of the first stitch, knit 3, and turn our work, and knit across. And grabbing some more yarn. Okay. Next row is to knit into the front and back of the first stitch, then knit 4, and we'll turn our work, knit across, and our last increase row is to knit into the front and back of the first stitch, and then knit 5, turn our work, and then knit into all 7 stitches, turn our work, and now we're going to bind off 4. Remember, we have to knit 2 in order to bind off the first one. So we knit 2, then pull the first stitch up and over the second and off the needle, bind off 1 complete. We knit 1 to bind off 1, knit 1 to bind off. That's 3, and then knit 1 to bind off 4. Remember, we had to knit 2 for the first one, which means the stitch on our right hand needle is now the first knit stitch for the next section, which is knit 3, so it's 1, 2, and 3. Okay, all even numbered rows are to knit across, so that is now our second set of rows 1 through 10 complete. See, now you're starting to see the outer edge of the petals. So what you want to do now is repeat rows 1 to 10 3 more times, and at that point we'll touch base again, and I'll show you how to do the last petal and how to join it all together into a flower. Okay, so here's a recap. We worked rows 1 through 10, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Then I worked rows 1 through 9 one more time, but instead of working the row 10 again, we're just going to bind off all of the stitches on this row. So we're going to bind off all 7 stitches, but not fasten off. Okay, so now that we've bound off all the stitches, we're not fastening off, we're leaving this stitch on our needle. We're turning our work to the side so that now we're going to work through this side, the side of the rows. And what you want to do is pick up and knit into every other row for a total of approximately 30 stitches. So we're going to start here, and because this is garter stitch, a good way to reference every other row is just pick up and knit either to the right or the left of that garter ridge. Whichever side you do it, just stay consistent, and then you'll know that you're every other row. So we're going to insert our needle into that side of the stitch, yarn over, and pull up a loop. That's called pick up and knit, or pick. So 3, 4, oops, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm working into the space after 2 strands. You could do it after the first one. I feel like it's more secure if I go under 2 strands. And I think that whichever way you decide to do it, it's just important to be consistent. Whoops. Okay, when we get close, I'll count to see if we need to space anything out. We're almost there. Okay, so we're close to the end. I think I have 2 more stitches to do, but let's just count to be sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. So I have 29 stitches already, so we'll just scoot ahead to 30. And now we're going to turn our work. I'm going to grab some more yarn too. And we're going to purl 2 together across the row. So we're going to take those 30 stitches and turn them into 15. So we're going to, with the yarn in the front, insert our needle through 2 stitches and knit through, or purl through both of them. So now we took 2 stitches and we turned them into 1. And we're going to repeat that across the entire row. You see how I'm pulling my work down? Sometimes if I'm having a hard time getting into the stitches, sometimes it helps to pull the body of work down a little bit. Just helps you to finagle your needle in there if the stitches feel a little bit tight. You're not going to hurt the yarn. That's the good news. Okay, so now we're down to 15 stitches. We're going to turn our work. And so now we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to, with our work facing us, we're going to, with our right hand needle, pick up the second stitch from the end and pull it up and over the first stitch and off the needle. Okay? And we're going to repeat that across the whole row, leaving that last stitch, leaving it alone and pulling each one individually up and over. Okay, just a couple more to go here. And last one. There we go. So now we want to leave our tail fairly long. I'm going to go with between 12 and 18 inches just so I have plenty of tail to work with for whatever I may want to do. And we're going to fasten this off. It's a little bit tight, so you might want to help the yarn through your last stitch with your fingers. There we go. So we've got that fastened off. We'll turn our work to the front, and you see it's starting to look like a flower now. What we're going to need is our yarn needle. And what you want to do is join with you want to seam up the 3 cast-on stitches with the last 3 of the bind-off stitches of that bind-off 7. So the first 4 would be the equivalent of all the other petals, but the last 3 need to go with the cast-on edge of 3 stitches, which will be part of the flower center. So we'll weave our yarn onto the yarn needle and just sew through those first 3 stitches on either side of the center. And by leaving our tail extra long, we can now make that hook that we'll need for attaching the ornament to the tree. Now you can decide at this point if you like the texture of your flower or if you think it needs a little stiffening. On my red one, I thought it needed a little stiffening to put it on the tree, so I actually laid it flat and sprayed it with some spray starch and let it dry. If you do decide to do that and you're in a hurry, you can use a hair blow dryer to dry it quicker. Okay, now we're going to hold the tail with our left hand to give it the height that we need for the loop to make it a hook for the tree. And we're going to keep that tight while I work a knot on this side. Keeping it tight in your left hand will mean that the yarn won't slide when you start tightening it. There we go. Okay, so now I'll just weave in our loose ends. Okay, and now on this one, just to recap, we worked knit every stitch on the even side or back side rows. And I want to show you a slight variation. This one I purled on the even numbered rows or wrong side of the fabric. So you can see what a difference that makes. This one has also been starched a little bit, so it's a little bit flatter, but you see you can even just do the same exact pattern and just change it from stockinette based to garter based, meaning knit every row instead of knit right side, purl wrong side, row every other row. And see what a difference that makes?